Hello, everyone. It's Lesley Timbol from Mental Iron. I just realized it's really dark, isn't it? Hold on. It's really overcast here, and I don't think my hat is helping. Hold on. There, maybe you can see me a little better. A little better. I have shiny forehead. My hair's a mess. That's okay. Anyway, so welcome to Mental Iron. I am your host, Lesley Timbol, and I'm here to answer certain questions. Today's topic is how to break up with your coach. Now, this can be a life coach, this could be your therapist, this could be your athletic coach. I'm going to be talking more from a bodybuilding standpoint, but again, this can be applied to many different kinds of circumstances. Now, if you don't have a coach and you're thinking about getting into a coaching, hiring a coach, what I would recommend at the start. So I'm going to do it. This is going to be a two-parter. First part is if you haven't hired a coach yet, some things to think about when hiring a coach as far as setting some boundaries. One is before you get it. So I'm going to do before you have a coach, as well as if you already have a coach and in your situation where you need to end your coaching relationship with them. So one aspect is how to properly break up with your coach before you have a coach. This is, so basically before you get started, think of it like a job. You know how you have that probationary period where you kind of get to know each other? It's similar to that when you're having a coach. So you're kind of setting some expectations out with a person that, and feel free to interview various coaches. Interview meaning talking to them, finding out, apart from their rates, what their style of coaching is, what your goals are. Is it fitness? Is it getting ready for a competition? Maybe you want to look good for a reunion. Maybe you're going to a wedding you want to look good for. Whatever the occasion or whatever the reason might be, have an idea of what your goals are going to be and what you would like to target. That way your coach can say, hey, I'm experiencing this or I'm not. Here's someone else I can recommend. They can give you a realistic timeline, or if you're like, this is my timeline, is this realistic for me? They have to have knowledge, but you also have to be able to get along with them. So we don't know at the start, like a job, what it's going to be like until you're in there. So instead of saying, let's say you're a competitor and you're planning on doing a bunch of shows, I don't want you to feel like if you're going to hire a coach, you want to set the expectation of saying, okay, coach, I'm going to do, let's say, 3 or 4 shows this year, and I'd love for you to coach me through all of them. Set the expectations of, I know this is new, we're getting to know each other. Let's see how the first show goes. My first show is in about 4 or 5 months. Whether they help you with an off season, which is ideal, guys. If you can go into a situation with a coach, if you're in that position, to do a bit of an off season before you go into a prep with them, so they can get used to your body. Hey, Alaric, nice to see you. If you have any questions about the coaching piece, let me know. Just feel free to put it in the chat. So right now, I'm just talking about for people who haven't hired a coach, but how to kind of set expectations up with your coach to not promise them a huge off season. Just let's try each other out, see if we can work together. Because sometimes you don't know if it will work for you, because you can have, let's say, some people in your gym saying, hey, this person is a really good coach, or they're my coach and I have a great working relationship with them. That may be great for them, but it may not work for you for whatever reason. So that's why I would like you to set, if you're thinking about hiring a coach, set the expectations up front once you decide on your coach, not to promise like a long off season. Just say, let's just try a show together and see how it goes. And, if they're an experienced coach, they're going to be on board with that. If they get really defensive, that's a red flag. Now, because it shows their inexperience. Any experienced coach knows that nothing is set in stone and things vary. Now, a coach is fine to saying, hey, give me a chance, because they're getting to know your body. Some mistakes that athletes will make is they'll wait until they're 12 weeks out from a show and then hire a coach, or even 16 weeks out and hire a coach. The problem with that is that it takes time to prep the body. And if your coach does not know your body and you're only giving them 16 weeks, they may miss the mark, not because they're not knowledgeable is because there's a lot of factors that go into every person's very individual, whether it's their age, their metabolism, how they respond to carbs or proteins, the training. There's a lot of things that go into it. So to give a coach a fair shot in 16 weeks, let's say, assuming that you're following what they're saying, there's good communication. If it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, let's say come show day, it's not necessarily anyone's fault. It's what do you learn from it, what works, what doesn't. You give that coach a bit more of a chance. So again, in the ideal world, you give them time in your off season to get to know your body and do at least a couple of shows, even like a trial show, like a practice show, if you will, to see how you guys peak. And then you can always make corrections for the real show, ideally, let's say 2 weeks later. So that's one way you can look at it. But the expectations on how to break up a coach is setting up the expectations at the front that you're just going to take it one show at a time. And you also want to find out communication styles, because coaches, and I don't know if you've had this experience, oftentimes it's very typical that you do check-ins. It might be once a week. It might be more than once a week. And as you get closer to a show, it's going to be a lot more frequently, and it could be every day. It could be multiple times a day as you get closer to the show. That is normal. So if they don't get back to you, let's say in the very beginning, you check in once a week. That's not unusual. You do check in pictures, talk about, how have your sleeping been going? Has there been any kind of stresses in your life? All that kind of stuff. So the coach has an idea of what's working, what's not working, so they can make the proper adjustments. But if they're saying your check-in is on, and I'm making this up, let's say it's a Sunday I'm making this up, 9:00. Okay, so you submit your pictures and your whatever you need to do, answer whatever questions on every Sunday at 9. If 2 days go by and your coach has not responded, that's a problem. They should be able to get back to you easily within 24 hours, easily. Find out also when you interview your coaches, what is their typical turnaround time? Now, if they say, I get back to you in the same day because you're sending me your stuff at 9 a.m., I should be able to get back to you, let's say, within 12 hours. Because keep in mind, you're not the only client. Okay, so it's important to be able to say, okay, so if they are promising you theoretically a 12-hour turnaround time, and they're going 24 hours. Now, the one off, let's say because they're traveling, because they have other clients that are athletes that might be in shows, okay. If it's a one-off, okay. But if it's happening over and over, bring it to that person's attention to say, hey, you know what, when we spoke, you were talking about a 12-hour turnaround time. Can I expect that moving forward? So give them a chance. Now, if they keep making that mistake, to say, look, if this happens again, I don't feel comfortable continuing with you. That's fine too. Now, that can be hard to do. It's hard to be confrontational, but do you notice how I'm saying it? I'm not trying to say it really angrily. It's trying to explain, hey, this is our understanding. This is why when it comes to, not that, I know this sounds very, this is being proactive, that when you hire someone as your coach and you don't know about them, even though they might even have a really good reputation, set the expectations so that later on, if there's a misunderstanding, you can go back to, hey, we had this agreement, or this is my understanding, and then go from there. So proper communication is really, really important. Now, apart from that, apart from the communication, is the understanding of what the goals are. If your goals are to compete in a show, as an example, and you want to bring up a weak body part, most of us will have at least one body part that we want to bring up. So for me, hamstrings are one of the many body parts I need to bring up. So I would want my coach to be able to help me put a training program together, whether that means I hit it on different angles, maybe I hit it twice a week, whatever it might mean, that needs to be incorporated in my program. And, we can talk about that. But if they're just giving me a typical program that they're giving everybody else, we call it a cookie cutter program, then that's not going to work. So there's a difference between what coaches say and what they deliver. Now, again, I want to be very clear on this. This does not mean if your coach is not delivering in some aspect of what you talked about in the beginning, give them a chance. Say, hey, look, this is my understanding is that you're going to help me build up my hamstrings. I feel that this is a regular program. How would this help me? Ask for clarification. Maybe they know something you don't, or maybe, like I said, they're falling behind and this is their kind of like wake up call. But if they keep going over and over and making the same mistakes, say, look, I'm sorry, I can't work with you. And that would really suck, because if you're going from your off season to in prep, and let's say you're 4 weeks out from a show, going and starting from scratch with a completely new coach 4 weeks out from a show is extremely risky. So not an easy decision to do. Some people will tough it out and see what happens. And some people will say, hey, you know what? I'm going to give this new coach. At least this will give us kind of a preview of, keep an open mind. They may not be able to dial you in as much as you want because they only had 4 weeks with you. But this is why it's so important to really do as much due diligence as you can with your coach when you're interviewing new coaches. Now, I've done this myself. I've gone through the process of going through various coaches, and whether it be referral, and been extremely disappointed, or some said that they were able to do certain things and they weren't. So it's really important. And sometimes you don't know until you try them out to see. Like I said, when you're working with a new coach, if you don't place properly and you followed everything to the plan, to what they told you to do from an exercise standpoint, from your diet, everything, and you followed everything to a T and you did not place, let's say, in the first call outs, that's not necessarily your coach's fault. Give your coach time to get to know your body. Like I said, it doesn't mean they can't learn your body and make adjustments. So you have to give them some time and some oftentimes more than one show so they can test certain things out. My preference is anytime I try a coach, I always like to do what I call a mock prep. So what that just means is, do a prep. I do an off season with them, do a prep with them, and usually several weeks out from the show, peak me up to the point as if it was a show, just to see how my body responds and what I look like. That way, let's say it's 3 or 4 weeks out from the show, we can still fine tune it if need be until the show day. And if I peaked really well, then I just grow into the show. So it's a win-win, because then I have time to correct any mistakes or fine tune any. And again, it's mistakes as far as lack of knowledge, as far as what my body's doing as far as responding. Now, remember, there's a difference between, let's say, ages, metabolisms, like some people have genetically gifted as far as getting better conditioned. Some people don't. So, there's so many variables that I don't want you guys feeling that, okay, I followed everything what my coach said and I didn't place well. Again, that's not necessarily the coach's fault. There's a lot of other factors that go into play. So give them a chance, unless they're really doing something off, okay? And that can happen. And that's, again, if you're in a place where you're interviewing a coach and you haven't got there, I want to give you some outs, and setting the expectations up front is really good, because you can always go back to that if they go, like I said, if those expectations are not being met, such as the communication. The next part I want to talk about are people who have already have a coach and it's not going well for whatever reason. I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why people fire their coach in a second. Let me just check on the chat for a second. Yeah, Larry, that's right. Yeah, off-season first is ideal, like I said, because it takes time to get to know the body. Kevin, nice to see you. Yes, I'm well. Thank you. I'm glad you're able to catch the live. That's awesome. Okay, so I want to talk about why athletes will break up with their coaches. Now, I've gotten actually some responses from this. Dave Palumbo and I did a show on iron therapy. We only touch the surface. I find with iron therapy, I can only touch the surface because we have such a short amount of time, which is why I like to do the lives. So I can answer the questions a little bit more in detail and answer any kind of questions. So I can, really tailor it to what you have to ask me or want clarification on. And then I can also do a video. I usually put out videos every Friday morning. So probably this Friday, what's today? It's Monday. Probably this Friday, I'll do a bit more of a detailed video on how to break up with your coach on the video as well. And then someone actually asked me, can you do on for coaches how to break up with athletes? So I will do that one as well, because that's a good question. So as far as if you have a coach, the reasons why people break up with coaches, okay, let's say they're not getting the progress they want with their coach. And let's say they've tried their coach for various shows. So their coach has had numerous opportunities and they still can't get dialed in properly. Either they come in flat or they look very soft or they're not really carved in. For whatever reason, they're not placing the way they want to. So they want to get another coach because they think, okay, another coach, another approach, maybe more experienced. Okay, so that's one reason why people might want to change their coaches. Another is, let's say they wanted to get their pro card and they got their pro card and they did pro shows and they were doing really well. Sometimes what happens is that even if they're doing really well with Coach X, whoever Coach X is, so it's not that the coach is doing anything wrong. They have a good coach-athlete relationship, but the problem then becomes the athlete thinks, but I wonder if there's something else I can do. So not that they're not doing well, but they already know what that coach's style is. And there's an expression is that the grass is greener on the other side. So what can happen is that some athletes will leave a very good coach just to try something different. And sometimes that different coach isn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't mesh well with that client or they don't get the results and they come back to their coach. If you leave on this is why it's important for a breakup with your coach, be mature about it. Be mature because one, you're an adult. Two, you know, the coach does put time into trying to prep you, trying to make you the best that you can be. Yes, of course, they're the athlete and that. A good coach generally wants what's best for you. And as hard as it is for a coach to lose an athlete. Okay, my connection is unstable. Why is my connection unstable? Let's see. Okay, my connection, I'm getting a message. I don't know, I'm getting a message that my connection is unstable. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Okay, now it disappeared. So hopefully you guys can hear me right now. So, where was I? The breaking up. Oh, okay, so sometimes they just feel that they want to try something different, even though they're doing well with a coach. Now, sometimes different, they might still do well with that new coach. Sometimes people get bored and they just want something different. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm just giving you some reasons why people do different coach or will try a different coach, even if their current coach is bringing them success. Now, a coaching relationship might not be a good fit because of, let's say, personality styles, expectations might be different, whereas some athletes need a lot more feedback, more communication with their coaches on a more regular basis. I'm not talking about peak week. I'm just talking about in general. And then some coaches just don't have the time to do that. So that may not be a good fit for them. Or some coaches are very to the point. They don't like lengthy answers. They're happy to answer your questions, but it's very, very short, whereas some athletes need a lot more explanation. So again, it's not that one's right, one's wrong. It's trying to find a good fit for who you are, what you need, and what the coach can deliver. Now, some coaches don't have the athlete's best interest in mind. There are some coaches that only want to have the more elite names, the more famous names, if you want, to make them look better. Or they have these top tier bodybuilders, and they want to be seen as their coaches because it makes them look good. So it's about the coach's reputation versus helping the athlete look their best. So there are coaches that don't have, like I said, don't have the athlete's best interest in mind. You want to stay away from them. If you ever have a coach who threatens you, who asks you for nude pictures, who says, if you leave me, I will smear your name on social media, dump them. And if you're too afraid because they're threatening to post pictures or whatever on social media or conversations, DM me. DM me, we'll figure it out together, okay? Because no coach should ever have behaved like that. That's extremely inappropriate, and certain measures could be levied against them. Now, sometimes people break up with a coach because they run out of money. It's not that the coach isn't worth it. It's just that, in these economic times, especially if you don't have any kind of backing from any kind of sponsors, you run out of money. So you can't get the coaching. You can't get what you need. So you might need to take a break, or you might have to quit bodybuilding just because, even, life situations. Let's say you get married or you start having children. Not to say people can't have children and compete. It's just usually if you're going to compete, then the other parent is left with the bulk of the responsibility of the household and the kids. And if they're willing to take that responsibility, great, but not everyone is, and that's no fault of the parent. It's just it's a lot to ask. So life situations can affect someone's ability to be able to hire a coach as well. So it's just, life changes, whether it be a family, whether you move, children, whether it be financial situations. Because, like I said, with coaching does cost money. And sometimes that's considered luxury expense when you have got about food on the table, the cost of eggs, let alone any other proteins, really high. Bills like, paying your mortgage, all this stuff. So that's life. So there's many reasons why people may need to break up with a coach. So before I go into a protocol about how you break up with a coach, let me just check with the chat here. All right. Do all bodybuilders or pro bodybuilders have a coach? I would say most do. Now, some will coach. That's a good question, Ulrich. Some actually coach themselves because what happens is that they've gotten over the years to know their bodies, about what works and what doesn't. And they're very comfortable and they prefer to coach themselves. So that's great. Now, but most of them have a coach. And it's not that they don't know what to do per se. It's just that when it comes to peak week, what happens is that it can be, whether it's internal pressure, where it's external pressure, where it's the low carbs, what happens is that we can't see ourselves the way other people see us. Okay, even in the best of circumstances. I think Dave and I did I'm pretty sure we did an episode on body dysmorphia. And it's very common, not just in bodybuilders. I'm picking on bodybuilders because I'm a bodybuilder. So I'm picking on bodybuilders to say what we see in the mirror, whether we're in prep or not, is not necessarily what other people see. Other people see us as, being athletic, in great shape, and we see ourselves like these little tubs. Okay. So it's when you're in that kind of pressure environment and you're prepping, especially for shows like, let's say, with the Arnold's coming up, I would say, do I have an exact number? No, but I would say at least 80%, if not more, would have coaches in the pro ranks, because that third eye, we call it the third eye, doesn't mean you have a third eye in your forehead, but it means an extra pair of eyes for you to see what you look like. Do you need to carb up a little? So here's the thing, getting ready for prejudging. So the day of the show, you have to be careful you don't come in flat. And if you carb up to be fuller, there's the fine line between your muscle bellies looking full and spilling over and you look like you haven't dieted. So sometimes people will see their one of their favorite athletes on Instagram that look shredded, that look awesome, and they see them on stage and they look like a water buffalo. And they're like, what happened to them? How can they get so fat? Well, it's not that they're fat. It's that they're retaining water. So they're very soft looking. So what happens is that there's this layer over the muscle, and that's why you can't see it. And it looks like fat. It's not fat, it's actually water. That's from the carbing up process. And that's how tricky it is to know how many carbs, how many grams of carbs is going to get you to the fullest. And if it's 1 gram or 2 grams over, you spill over. It's really hard. And that's why when you're having a judgment and you are on nerves, it's best if you have that other person say, hey, let's try this. And again, remember, if you do a mock prep ahead of time, you're going to feel a little bit more confident. Nothing's guaranteed, but you'll have a better idea of what the grams are of as far as carbs, or, what they call is carbing up, how many carbs you have, how much water you have. Now, some people won't have a lot of water, so they can seem tighter. Other people, depending on their metabolism, need water. Otherwise, they look flat. So again, it's a lot of trial and error. You don't wait till peak week and try a whole bunch of new stuff. You trial this stuff weeks and weeks before to see how the body responds, so you have a better idea. But still, nerves can get the best of us. We can't make good judgments, even as pros, even though pros have done shows after like dozens of shows. But no two shows are the same. No two preps are the same. So even if they came at their absolute fullest, diced, conditioned, deep separation, if they repeat the exact same thing they did that peak week and that day of the show for another show, they may not look the same. That's how funky our bodies can be. And that's why you need someone to make last minute adjustments. And you need someone who's really, really good, not just knowing your body, but knowing how to play with the various variables. That's why it's nice to have a coach. So I hope that answers your question, Eric. Kevin, I thought it was my Wi-Fi playing up. No, Kevin, I don't know why. Sometimes my internet connection does that, so I apologize. So it was actually my side, not your side. Smeg, nice to see you. We'll watch this tomorrow. It's early in the morning here. Smeg, good night. And if you have any questions, just post them in the comments below and I will get to them, okay? I promise. And if you have any ideas for future videos, or if you want me to answer any questions, just let me know. Hey, dude, how you doing? Any tips on how to avoid negative thinking and negative thought loops? Okay. Yeah, actually, that's a great question. Okay. Avoid negative thinking. First of all, I don't want you to avoid it. I want you to conquer it. Because to avoid it means it's like, it's an issue that you don't want to deal with, which I understand. I'm not saying it's good to have negative thinking. But if we have negative thinking, that's actually a key to something that needs to be addressed. So it's like when someone says, they said, Lesley, I have all this anxiety. I wish I would never have anxiety again. And I'm like, if you didn't have anxiety, you might be dead right now, because what keeps you alive is having some level of awareness. And in order to have awareness of what's going on around you, you have to have a little bit of anxiety. Now, granted, you're probably talking about negative thinking that's playing on you. Now, maybe it's affecting your sleep. Maybe it's affecting your ability to concentrate during the day, whether it be work, school, any of that kind of stuff. That's why I assume is that what you meant, dude? Is that when you're saying the negative thinking, at what time of the day does it hit you the most? Can you answer that for me, if you don't mind? Travis, when did coaches become so vital to bodybuilders? Travis, I think what happens is that, a lot of times, and to the point, if bodybuilders, and I think, Lee Priest is one of them, he knows his body, not to say he wouldn't be open to someone gave him a suggestion, but he knows his body so well that he knows what works and what doesn't. But there are a lot of people who don't. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the people who don't need a coach are people who, generally speaking, aren't as genetically gifted, so they need more help. Now, there are people who are genetically gifted that do have coaches for sure. But again, it's that lack, it's wanting to, it's okay. So here's the thing. There are some people that are really good about knowing their bodies and knowing what works and what doesn't. And others know some stuff that works, but are relying on other people who have expertise and maybe have spent more time. Maybe they've studied certain things to be able to rely on their coaches. For me, that's for me. I've done, how many shows have I done? 12, 13, 14. I want to say, I have to look this up. I want to say I think I've done 17 shows, but I have to look that up. I know I've 13, 14. It's either 15 or 17. I have to look this up. I still have a coach because my body has changed over the years. And it's actually very hard for me to find a coach that's used to dealing with someone as old as I am, because a lot of coaches are used to dealing with people in their 20s, their 30s, and their 40s. There's not a lot of coaches that have a lot of athletes in their 50s. Not to say that they don't exist. And to deal with females, post-menopause, there's a lot of stuff that happens with hormones. I'm not genetically gifted, and I'm not willing to do a whole bunch of gear. Now, when I'm competing, I do go on a cycle, but I always keep stuff very, very low. I don't like to go in anything high. And I don't like taking a lot of compounds. And that's my preference. If someone chooses to do a lot of stuff, or higher doses than I do, that's their choice. I respect people's ability to make their own choices. But at the same time, I have to do what's right for me. So for me, I need a coach who's not going to just slam a bunch of gear down my throat to get ready for a show. I know it's old-fashioned, but it's the training, it's the eating, all the stuff in between. I don't mind taking vitamins. I take tons of multivitamins, enzymes, probiotics. I do take creatine. I do take fermented L-glutamine, like vitamin C. I like all that stuff. I take all that stuff. But, for me, I need a coach that knows their stuff, because the body and the hormones change with age. So I don't know if you wanted to answer anything about that to Travis. I mean, did you ever have a coach, or did you always coach yourself? I'm curious about that. Okay, is it important to carb up, and if so, why? When is it beneficial to carb down? That way less body fat shows more definition. Okay, so Alaric, what happens is, yes, it is important to carb up, because what happens is when it comes to preparing for a show, you need to deplete the body. And there's a big process in order for your body to look full. Like, you have to deprive it. Now, again, are there people that are going to be genetically gifted that don't need to deplete as hard? Most likely. And they need a shorter, they can use a longer time to carb up. I know people that can carb up during their peak week 5 or even 6 days before the show. And it works for them. Like, they do it slowly and they do it gradually, but they're able to do that, and they do really well on stage. They look really full when they carb up. Because if you don't carb up, you're going to look flat on stage. So the idea is, when you go on stage, you want to look full, those round muscle bellies, but you don't want to spill over like in your stomach, or you look watery. So that's why I'm saying it's a bit of a fine-tuning piece. It's a science and an art, I think. I don't know what that science art is. That's why I have to rely on a coach myself. Dude, yeah, usually I have the negative thoughts when I'm trying to sleep. Hey, Xavier, how are you? We're talking about coaching and, and stuff like that. So if you have any questions, just put it in the chat. Thanks for joining. Okay, so when it comes to negative thoughts when you're trying to sleep, dude, I think you and I need to talk, because this isn't the first time you brought this up. And I don't know if you want to put it in the chat. I have no problem talking about it in the chat. But if you don't feel comfortable doing this, because this is in a public venue, send me a DM on my Instagram so we can dialogue back and forth more specifically about your situation, about these negative thoughts. But like I said, if you're okay with it, put it in the chat, and I will definitely deal with it. But again, it's in a public forum. If you want it just privately one-on-one, DM me on Instagram, Lesley T_mental_iron. That's in the description below, so we can talk about this further. Because this is something that I feel that you've been struggling with for some time, and I want to help you. But I want to respect your privacy if you want to do this one-on-one. Okay. Hey Phil, how you doing? Welcome to the chat. By the way, if I don't reach out to you, Lesley, because I forget, reach out to me as I've got an idea of how we could work. Awesome. Okay, Xavier, I'd love that. I will do that. I would love that. Because, okay, so for anyone in this chat, if you have not followed Desktop Bodybuilding, highly, highly recommend it. I watch so many good bodybuilding podcasts, and Xavier is one of them. I like it because he gets really, you can tell. There's a lot of bodybuilding podcasts, and some people just do it because they're bored. But some people have a real passion for it. And Xavier, who does Desktop Bodybuilding, you can tell. He is so passionate about it. And if you guys want to talk about any kind of competitor, future, like let's say the Arnolds, he's your guy. He is definitely your guy. And I love the discussion you had earlier, Xavier, about Lee Priest's comment about eliminating the 212. And let me just say, I am so glad you had that conversation. And I don't know if Lee was on purposely poking the bear, because I'm like, in my head, when Jose Raymond said no, I'm like, damn right, Jose. It's like, do not eliminate the 212 for those exact reasons that were outlined in Desktop Bodybuilding. Sorry, guys, I'm going on a tangent. I'm just really passionate about this stuff. But do not eliminate the 212, because there are a lot of people that would never go into open bodybuilding because they wouldn't know how their body's going to respond until they do a show and they start building that muscle. Most people are not born out of the womb and end up being the open bodybuilder. You have to build muscle. And a lot of us, if you don't know, and if you never put yourself through a show, you have to go through a process of building that lean muscle tissue, train over. And again, this takes years, guys. It's not overnight, unless you're Ronnie Coleman, but most of us are not. So what we do is we go through a process of saying, okay, what kind of category can I do? Most people, if you had asked, let's say, whether it be Flex Lewis, we're talking the top of the 212s here, or even, like Sean Clarita, who's doing open now. Maybe when they were 20 years old, 24 years old, if they said, do you want to do open bodybuilding? Like, there's no way I could do it. Of course. If I'm Sean Clarita, I'm not Sean Clarita, but if I was Sean Clarita, I'm like, there's no way. Like, look at my height. And I'm saying when he was younger, and I'm not calling Sean Clarita old by any stretch, but when Sean Clarita was younger, I'm sure he would thought he wouldn't have a hell's snowball and chance to be able to make it to open. Look where he is now. But he wouldn't even have tried if 212 didn't exist, because 212 was more of a category he could grow into. And then he can reassess at that point, hey, does my body want to grow? If it does, go to open. But if your body does not want to grow for whatever reason, stay in 212. So let's see how many times you can hit the 212 and win 212. So that's why I think 212 is really important, because not everyone is Lee Priest. And I have a lot of respect for Lee, by the way. But I'm just saying not everyone is that upper echelon. And from a money building standpoint, from a business standpoint, they'd lose a lot of money not having 212s. So it's also, we want to be able to encourage people to do something that's more realistic. And it's not always realistic for guys to hit open. Maybe 212's more realistic. Maybe, and people have been able to grow, and maybe they start in physique. Potentially, they might start in men's physique. Then they might go into classic. They go in, and again, they move up. Look at Stan. So Stan, was able to, if people might know him as Stanimal, he's grown up and he's been able to get, as his body's been able to build, so he can go to the next level, which is awesome. So sorry for the tangent, guys. I just really like talking about bodybuilding. So Xavier, I will talk to you later about that later. Thank you for reaching out and for joining the channel. And like I said, put anything you want about coaching. I will get back to the coaching, I promise. Okay, so Larry, depleting. Okay, so let me explain what depleting. So depleting, it's important to think of it like now this is not the most scientific explanation, but think of like a balloon. When you take a balloon you've never blown into it, it has a certain kind of texture to it. So if you want that balloon to be more puffy, I'm using the balloon as kind of like a metaphor for your muscle. It's not the best metaphor, but to deplete is what you're doing is you're kind of like stretching it. You're depleting it by making it's still flat, but you're stretching it. So when you put that air into it, which is your carbs, you make it more full. Because if you don't stretch your balloon and you just blow into it, yes, it will increase, but it won't have as big of a shape to it as if you don't, if you stretch I don't know if this is making sense, but if you take your deflated balloon, so it's flat, if you just blow it up, it's going to have a certain shape. If you take the flat balloon and you stretch it, okay, and then you blow into it, it's going to be actually fuller when you blow it up. I don't know if that makes any sense. So let me know if you're like, Lesley, I have no idea what you're talking about. Feel free to say that too, okay? Overthinking. Okay, don't mind talking about it. Okay, cool. Okay, so let me talk about the negative thoughts, and I'll come back to coaching. Alaric, okay. I was thinking the opposite. The opposite of what, Alaric? Give me an idea. I want to make sure I address what you're saying. So comment on that, and then I want to talk about the negative thoughts. So do 22. I don't mind talking about it publicly. Let's talk about it then. What are the specific negative thoughts that are keeping you up? As far as you're saying, it's mostly at nighttime. So when you're trying to go to sleep, what are some of the thoughts going into your head? I want to know specifically. As well, Alaric, you're saying you have negative thoughts too, the overthinking. So when you're saying overthinking, again, be specific. What are you overthinking about? Because then I can tailor my response to your particular situations. Okay. While you're answering that, let me quickly go back into the coaching piece. So as far as breaking up with your coach, I explained why. The protocol is, let's say you have a coach that you just hired, and let's say it was only a couple of sessions, and you just found, you know what, it wasn't working out for whatever reason, you just didn't feel a good matchup. Well, I would say, if it was only a short period of time, you could probably get away with an email or a text message. If it's been more than a couple of sessions, can I suggest that you either pick up the phone or maybe do a Zoom call, or if you see them in person, have a face-to-face. It's like any kind of relationship. You want to give them that kind of respect. Now, I know people like to avoid that kind of stuff because it's not pleasant. You don't want to hurt the other person. You don't want to hurt their feelings. And a lot of times people will ghost, and I don't know, I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. They will ghost their coaches because they feel a bit embarrassed that they just kind of, they couldn't be truthful because they didn't want to upset their coach. But any professional coach, guys, they might feel a little disappointed, but they want what's best for you. And they know this is a business, even if there's a bit of a friendship there. And again, at the end of the day, if you want to end things on a more civil, positive note, especially if there's a friendship involved. So the best way to break up with a coach is be honest. Now, having said that, there's different ways of being honest. So let's say the issue about why you're breaking up with your coach is you don't have the money. Finances are really tight. You have a whole bunch of bills, taxes, whatever is going on. You're just not in a position to continue on with them as your coach. So it may not be a reflection of their coaching style. It's just lifestyle. I don't have the money. If that's the case, if you at least give your coach that information, then they know, hey, it wasn't me. I understand it's the situation. And it's the lack of your finances that's preventing you from continuing the sessions at this time. The coach would be so thankful knowing that it wasn't a reflection of them. And they would understand. Because as coaches, by the way, there's not many rich coaches. I'm not saying coaches can't make money, but bodybuilding in general, I'm not saying you can't make money from bodybuilding, but generally speaking, there's not, people do it because they love the sport and they want to help. It's not necessarily a moneymaker. Now, let's say, one other thing. If you have had a positive experience with your coach, it wouldn't be a bad idea. And again, it's only if you've had a positive experience, let them know what you enjoyed about the experience, what you learned from them, how you benefited from their coaching experience. And if you really liked it, offer them a written testimonial, because all of a sudden your coach is going to have one spot now open in their roster. Maybe you can help fill that up for them by giving them that testimonial. Now, they might have a waiting list. I don't know. But I mean, I'm sure they would appreciate a testimonial regardless. Now, let's say you feel that you no longer need a coach because now let's say you've done some shows, you have an idea of what works for your body from a training standpoint, from a diet standpoint, and that you feel that you can do this on your own. And there are lots of athletes who've come to that point to say, hey, I think I can do this on my own now. Well, that's great. Let them know that, to say, because of what you've taught me, I feel like I can do this on my own. Any good teacher, if you're a good teacher, you want your students to be able to catch up and surpass you. If you feel that you always have to know more than your students can't outdo you, that is not a good sign of a good coach. And are they really, do they really have your best interests at heart? They might need to grow as a coach from a professional standpoint of view, but you still need to leave. At the end of the day, you can just let them know, hey, I really appreciate it. I learned how to tweak my body. I learned that carbs were a good thing or were not a good thing. Cardio was a good thing or was not a good thing. I learned a lot of things from you, from our experience. I really appreciate that. And I know you'll do well. And your clients are lucky to have you. That's a great way of ending a coaching relationship. And again, if you have a good coach, they'll really appreciate that. Now, let's say you were out of sync with your coach. So that means that you felt you were wasting your time and your money on this coach, because whether you feel that they didn't know what they were talking about, there was a lack of communication. Let's just say in those kind of situations, if you've given your coach some opportunities to, you make some observations as far as, hey, I noticed you've been taking a little bit longer to respond to my emails or messages. I just want to check in to say, is that unrealistic for me to expect a response within 24 hours? And if they say, and they should say, again, barring, let's say they have a show, let's say, especially a big show, let's say like the Arnold's or the Olympia, they might be kind of busy that weekend. If you're not competing that weekend, they need to have to focus on the athletes that weekend. So they might need to delay your check-in day, a few days because of a big show. Be a little bit more open-minded. You're not their only client. But if this happens over and over and over again, to say, look, I need someone that's a little bit more attentive, more attentive. I appreciate your help. Do find something positive to say and say, but I am going to be looking for someone else who can give me that more regular support. So at least they have some type of reason. Whether they accept it or not is irrelevant. It's, you need to be able to say, give them an answer. You don't have to go into huge amounts of details and then cut it off. You can be polite about it. That's fine. Because remember, no matter what happens, you want to try to end things on a positive note. No, you can try to be as positive as you can, and they could be negative, but then again, that could be more of a reflection of them than it is on you. But if it's a good coaching relationship, there's likely going to be some type of friendship there, especially if you worked with them for a long period of time. I mean, look what happened with Nick Walker and Matt Jansen. They had a disagreement or misunderstanding, but they were able to communicate again, and they're able to work together. And look at Nick. Like, I mean, I saw Nick, last week at the Dragon's Lair, and he looks phenomenal. I can't wait to see what it looks like at the Arnold's. But having a good relationship, and we're focusing again more on the coaching relationship, can really contribute to being in a good positive mindset, especially when you're competing, to have that encouragement, that support, but someone who's not going to bullshit you, because you're going to have people around you. Let's say you're, people in the gym that say, hey, you look great. And they mean that. It's not that they're necessarily trying to blow smoke up your ass, excuse my language, but what they're trying to do is they're being supportive, and they're comparing themselves to say, you look great, and you might look great. But from a competitor standpoint, your coach will be honest to say, hey, you know what? I need you to let's really tune this in or bring this in more sharper, because I know what your competition is going to look like, and I know what you can potentially look like, and I want to get you there. Okay. So your coach is going to be, and sometimes the coach, there's various coaches out there that say very little until usually after the show's done. And then they say positive stuff, because they don't want. Sometimes coaches feel that if they say anything positive, that you're going to get kind of lazy, or you're not going to stay sharp. It's almost like we need to feel a little anxious to stay on our toes. I don't know if that makes sense, and some just are not just big talkers. And if they say anything positive, it's huge. It's huge. So it depends on the coach, and it depends on, your character, and can you understand that? And if you need someone who's a lot more wordy or more supportive or emotionally, here's the other piece. If you have a coach that you really like and knows your body, and you feel confident in their abilities, but they don't give you those warm fuzzies or that emotional support, does it mean you necessarily have to drop them? No, you have one other option. You could go to another coach who's hopefully is knowledgeable and can get to know your body if you give them time. So that, I'm not saying it can't happen, but the other option is, if you really like your coach and it works for you, you can have someone like myself additionally in your corner to help you with that emotional support. Now, I don't do that for free because I have to pay my bills too. But if you want, that's part of the mental game coaching. A lot of bodybuilders are missing out on this. I'm telling you right now, if I was on Rami's side, as far as now, I support him, but if he has hired me, it would be very, very different. Now I can't address some of the physical pieces, but the mental piece I can. There's a lot of top level athletes. It's not that they don't know what they're doing, but guess what? Athletes are human beings, which means they can be super tough, no question about it. But every single one of us, athlete and non-athlete alike, has insecurities, and they strike not when we want them to, and usually at very inopportune times. That's why a mental game coach like myself is really important, to even be on standby the week leading up to the day of the shows. So keep that in mind when you're hiring a coach. Let's say you know how to train and you just want the coach for the diet. Get a coach like myself for the mental game piece. Now, similar to a regular coach, let me help you in your off season. Give me time to work with you, not just during your peak week, because then I can really fine tune things. So peak week, we're going to be sailing in, because mentally you're going to be so much sharper if we work together. If you give me only a few days, I can only work within those few days. It's not to say I can't do something, but we can do more with more time. So keep that in mind. Okay, let me just go into the chat. All right, so so the balloon metaphor, I was thinking the opposite, depleting as in shutting the body of water and fat, the way the muscles look more defined. Okay, so Alaric, let me just say, for you to get more information on the depleting piece, I think it's really important. I think that's a fair question to ask. I think someone who can be more, who can answer this better would be something like, if you go to, let's say, Dave Palumbo, if you go to Think Big Bodybuilding, there's a lot of experts there on the show that are really knowledgeable about this thing, and they can probably describe it in a better way than I can. So you can really understand, because it's a really good question, but I don't want to mislead you, and I want to make sure you get the proper terminology and explanation. But I think it's a great question. But like I said, if you send a message to, let's say, Scott McNally at Think Big Bodybuilding, he has a lot of people on his panel that can answer that question, or Dave Palumbo on RX Muscle, he would know too. Okay. Okay, I think that I am not meeting my full potential, like I'm missing out and there's something I should be doing that I'm not doing. Okay, dude, okay. That fear of missing out, FOMO stuff. Okay, it's likely that if you're not meeting your full potential, if you even feel that you're not meeting your full potential, you probably aren't. Because if you're meeting your full potential, you're so busy that you know that you have a game plan in mind. So my thing is, I'm guessing we need to know your why. Why are you here? Now, I know it's a big philosophical question, but what is your purpose in life? Let me break it down. Remember that shit sandwich? I don't know if you remember seeing that video I did on the meaning of life. Go into Mental Iron and you'll see in the archives some questions. I think there's seven questions you can ask yourself to figure out what your purpose in life is. But when you find out what your meaning is, why you're here, and it's not just to breathe, it's not just to work, it's not just to work out. As far as what can you give back to society, because there's stuff that we can do to grow as people, such as physically. Yes, not to say the gym is bad, it's definitely not bad, and it's great stress management actually, and it's great for socialization, getting that feeling of fitting in, because some people in the normal world who don't work out at all have a hard time understanding why training is beneficial. So there's a lot of good positives for working out, but that's from a physical part. What can you do from elevating yourself as a person for you? And then what can you do to maybe potentially help other people? A lot of this stuff, like all this stuff that I'm doing, is free content. Anyone can watch this stuff. They can ask me questions. I do my videos. Obviously, I do Iron Therapy with Dave Palumbo. There's a lot of free stuff I do. This is my contribution. And then, I can work with people one-on-one. I can even do groups, but then I would have to charge too, because like I said, I have to pay my bills somehow. But my contribution is being able to bring mental awareness and provide strategies for athletes and non-athletes alike to be able to address a lot of mental challenges. So mental challenges being, let's say, relationship issues, depression, anxiety, grief and bereavement, gender identity. It can be a whole stress management, anger management, all this stuff, in addition to sports related stuff, the influence of social media, trolls, okay, internet trolls, the pressure, external pressures such as pleasing your fans, pleasing your sponsors, pleasing your coach, that kind of stuff. There could be, how do I manage, let's say, if I have to retire early because of an injury, or maybe not necessarily retire, but what happens, I get injured a few weeks before my show. That does a mental number. Someone I loved just died. Do I compete? There's a lot of things that come into play when it comes to competing as well. So I focus mostly on bodybuilding, but a lot of this stuff can be applied to other sports or business, or things basically outside of sports. But again, I use bodybuilding as a specific example because I work with bodybuilders and other athletes. But when you're talking about missing out, it's more about, dude, finding out let me ask you this. What do you wish that you had that would really help you in your situation? So as an example, a lot of people, and I'm just using this as an example. So for people who've been diagnosed with cancer, as an example, yes, that would suck. And I'm not saying you can't try to overcome it or fight it, but I'm saying once they've been diagnosed with cancer, do you know what happens? Then they have this invested interest to saying, I wish that going through the cancer experience, I had someone to talk to, that I knew certain resources, that I, whatever something was missing, because they can relate to that. And then they end up filling that gap to saying, you know what, I'm going to help other people who are going through cancer. I'm going to put together a support group. Now, I'm just using this as an example, do 22, stuff that you can do both for yourself and to help other people. What is something that you are missing in your life that you can identify with? So it could be whether it's a diagnosis, whether it's working with a certain population, whether it's kids, whether it's with adults, whether it's with the elderly, whether it's with athletes, whether it's non-athletes. Figure out the population of people that you want to touch, or a period of time in your life that was missing something. Could you fill that missing gap? And if you're like, I know what the gap is, Lesley, but I'm not qualified to fill it. Well, let's talk about that. Because either you're more qualified than you think, or we just need to kind of top up maybe certain educational requirements. But I think that once you have a map, a goal, a strategy, where you need to, what you want to do, because when you're passionate about something, you're doing it not for the money. I mean, would you want to be paid for it? Of course. But when you're passionate about something, that's when it's going to get you through those really tough days. Because even if you love your job, there's going to be some aspects of your job you do not like. And sometimes you need that why to remind you, this is why I do it. There are times where, let's say, I'm going to pick on Jay Cutler. I'm sure there are times when Jay would just love to have a day to himself and not be traveling. And I'm not saying he doesn't love his fans. He does. But you probably heard that when he goes places, unless he has to hop on a plane or be at a different appointment, he's the first one there and the last one to leave, because he really appreciates the fans. But what keeps him there is that he probably remembers lining up for someone he might have wanted to see, but because he was in the back of the line and his guy he was waiting for had to leave, he knew what that felt like, and he never wanted anyone else to feel that way. Never forget where you came from. That always can keep you really grounded. And again, that can build character. Pressure makes diamonds, okay? So if we're little lumps of coal, get the right kind of pressure and you know how to deal with it. I'm not saying you can't fall, get back up. I tell people, and do not take this the wrong way, so keep an open mind, I want you to fail. Let me explain why. If you fail, you get the chance to learn. You get the chance to get a piece of knowledge you did not have before. So you get smarter, you get wiser. It's like when you play a game and you get to level up because you get the key, or you get a weapon, or you upgrade, or whatever it is, you get certain points. That's what mistakes do. They make us stronger, they make us wiser if you learn the lesson. The other choice is you wallow in it, play the victim, and nothing else changes. I don't like the latter, I like the former. I like the smarter piece, don't you? So this is why I want people to fail, not because I want them to stay down. It's sometimes we need to hit the bottom in order to be able to propel up. So that's what I want for all of you, including myself. Trust me, I have failed more times than I can count. But was it Michael Jordan who said, I think it was Michael Jordan, something to the effect of, he doesn't, despite being one of the greatest of all time, and people can debate that all they want, but he is one of the best out there for basketball. Did he sink every ball into the net? No. Doesn't mean he wasn't great. It wasn't perfect. But he also said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So what he meant is failure is not trying at all. Failure, a lot of times we're afraid to fail. We're afraid to try because it won't work out. When that's not the definition of failure. Failure is not even going, not trying. If you try and it doesn't work out, then you learn from it. If you never try, you never learn. It's like I want to win a lottery, but I don't pay for the ticket. It doesn't work that way. A ticket won't magically appear. You need to try, you need to fail, you need to learn, you need to fall, you need to get up, you need to fall, you need to get up. At some point, you're going to get up and stay up. And that's a great feeling. And I hope that for all of you. But I want you to have a deeper sense of that why. Find out what is missing in your life. Because if it's missing in your life, it's going to be missing in some other people's lives. And it's learning, how do I fill that gap? Now, there might be more than one gap. Find out what gap resonates most with you. All right, so Lyric. My wife might have cancer. She's seeing some specialists soon. Okay, so Valhalla. Okay. Yeah. I had that on my music list, actually. Who sings it? Oh, I can't even remember. But they sing that. Yeah. Welcome to Valhalla. I can't remember who sings this. James Hong would know, but it's in my playlist when I listen to my music. But yeah, I want you guys to be able to thrive. And in order to thrive, we need to survive. In order to survive, we have to actually suffer to some degree. We have to sacrifice to some degree. But then we learn. And it's the learning part that sometimes we get stuck on. And that's why sometimes it's good to talk to somebody. So I want you guys to be able to feel free to be able, and I know we live in a society that's very judgmental, but, we still need to be able to get it out there and go to someone who's trusted. So if you feel that you're comfortable talking with me, join me in my live chats. I have them every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If there's an exception, I'll post that I won't be able to, or I'll be delayed or whatever. And it wasn't earlier this year just because I had that post-Olympia flu cold thing. But normally I'm healthy. So I will be doing these shows. Now, if it's something very private, like I said, send me a DM on Instagram. If you have any questions that I didn't get a chance to, or let's say you're watching this after the fact, put it in the comments below. I do read my messages. I do respond to them. Or if you don't feel comfortable posting it because other people might see your question, send me a DM on Instagram. Once again, my handle is in the description, but it's Lesley T _mental_iron. Okay, so yeah, you just got over COVID again. You know what? Here's the thing about the C word. You will develop a tolerance to it as much as it's a pain in the butt. But we are going to survive this. We will get through this because we are, if anything, stubborn creatures. And a lot of times when we're stubborn, it has a negative connotation to it. But if you can spin it like a basketball, stubborn can mean persistent, relentless. And I want you guys to be relentless too. So with that, guys, I'm going to end for today. Like I said, anything, put it in the comments below or send me a DM. Xavier, I'll send you a message later. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. And remember to keep your mental game on. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.